This is the 2-3 TEKS 12B function notation notes. I'm not going to read all of this to you. I expect that you'll hit pause and do the copying. Functions are a special relationship in math where the input goes exactly to one output. We've established this. Function notation is a way to identify when you are looking at a function. And just to remember that y equals is the same thing as whatever we want to write the function notation as. And it really doesn't matter what our f or the letter is in front of the parentheses. We can call it anything we want. And it is important to note that f of x does not mean f times x. That's very important. It's a designation, kind of like when you're saying your formal name. So if you have a nickname and you have a formal name, your formal name would be like f of x, and your nickname would be like the y. Both of them identify as you, but it depends on who you're talking to. So when you have f of 3, that is indicating that the number 3 is equal to the x. So we can take 3, plug it in where x is, and we will, in the function or the equation, and we'll find out what the y value, the f of x value for x equals 3 is. If f of x equals 3, that means the y value is 3, and we're going to solve for x. So the examples show you how you can plug in the number -1 in where the space was for x, and then solve it out just using regular PEMDAS. So we did 3 times -1 minus 4. -3 minus 4 is -7. If we're doing x squared, you would put the number into every place where you had an x in the equation. So it replaces the x in the x squared and the x in the 2x. And then we would use PEMDAS again. The other way we can do it is a process on our calculator, which I'm going to demonstrate. The steps are right up here at the top. So you'll go to New, you'll say Calculator, and then you're going to push immediately menu 1, which will write the word define for you. You can also type it out with the bottom, but if that gets a little cumbersome, you can just write f of x. So now you'll type in whatever the equation is that you're doing, including the f of x. So this time you will have to use the letters f, and then parentheses is right here, and then you type x, and then use the arrow to get off and say equals 3x minus 4, and then you say enter. So that types in the equation, and it should look exactly like it does on your paper. Now if we want to evaluate f of -1, we type in f parenthesis, and we put in -1 using the negative key instead of the minus key. And we hit enter, and it will solve it for us. This works anytime you're trying to use the equation, use function notation, and the number is inside the parentheses. It does not work if the number is equal to it. In that case, we have to solve it using solving equation solution and steps, like we did in the first unit. Okay. So I've also showed you on here all of the different setups. So it doesn't matter if it's f of x, g of x, h of x, or j of x. You can define each one, and then when you put in g of 0, and it will give that particular one, and it will use the equation that you said g of x was. Okay, so the next thing is what if we're looking at a table? So if the number is inside the parentheses, we are looking at the x part of the table. So we find -7, whatever the number is that's paired with that is the answer, that's 4. If x is 15, its pair is 0. And then if it's f of x equals 5, we can still use the table, but this time we're going to look at the f of x line, find 5, and what it's paired with is your answer, 4. So for 2, there were 2 x values paired with that, so we have to write both. Okay, sometimes you'll have an x value being a problem that'll say if f of x equals 14, find the x. This is a situation where they're saying the y equals 14, so we're going to set the equation 4x minus 6 equal to 14. and then solve for x to figure out what the x was. And we would do that the same way we've been doing solving any equation. Once you've got it set up, it looks just like what we've been working on. We add box in our 4x so we don't accidentally move it first. Add the opposite of -6, and then divide by 4 so we get x is 5. If we have a fraction, I know a lot of you do not like fractions, there's a really great way to get rid of fractions, and that's to multiply all of the pieces by the common denominator, which in this case is 2. So we multiply 13 by 2 because that's what g of x was, so we're replacing g of x with 13. Multiply -3 halves by 2, which leaves the -3x, but not the divided by 2. And then multiply 4 by 2. Then we add our -8 on both sides and divide by -3 to get x is -6. So I left 2 problems for you to do. On number 7, it just wants us to rewrite the f of x, the function notation, in terms of points. This way you can put it on a graph. So remember, the number inside the parenthesis is your x, the number outside with the equal sign is your y. So that's -1, 1, and then -2, 3. If they give you a question where they give you various different equations and they want you to do like g of 3, the first step is to go copy down the version of the graph function you need, then plug in your 3, and you can either do it by hand or like I showed you earlier with the calculator. And the same thing with h of -5. You'd go copy down h of x, plug in your -5 where the x is, so they go in the same spot, and then divide out and you get -2. If it says find x, if g of x is 20, then you're going to take your g of x equation, the x squared plus 4, set that equal to 20, and then solve for x, which I've done here. If they put a number in front of f of x, that means multiply whatever f of x is by 3, also putting 4 in where x is, and then solve. And then sometimes you have problems where they say, well, let's stick an expression in to replace x. Hopefully they don't use the same variable inside the x, inside the parentheses as you're replacing, because that can get confusing. But if it isn't, easiest way to do this is just give yourself write f parentheses, write in what you're replacing, and then copy the equation, but leave the spot where the x is blank, and then fill it in with whatever's in the parentheses. And then you would simplify by gathering like terms and doing distributing double rainbow if you need to. Okay, the last thing we need to look at is what about function notation with graphs? So they've given us a graph and they said, here's the graph, what's f of -2? What that means is go to x is -2 and find out where that point is on the graph and what is that y value. So at x is -2 is right here, there's the graph, and it is at +2, which is -2, 2 point. At x is -1, it's right here, which is y is 0. At f of 0, we are at -2, and at 3, we're basically between 2 and 3, which is about 2.5. If they want you to look at f of x is -3, that means go to your -3 on the y, scroll across, and find where the graph touches that point. So it touches it here, and though it doesn't have a point here, it does have an arrow saying it keeps going, so it really does touch again here. So x is at -4 and 5. And then finally we have, if they give you an equation, you can use your graph, your calculator, to look at the table, and we can fill in the table and then also fill in the graph. Or you can take 0, plug it in for in 2 times 0, 10 minus 2 times 0, which is 10 minus 0, or 10. 10 minus 2 times 1, 10 minus 2, which is 8. And you can fill in your answers by doing some simple mental math. When you get down to problems where they have f of x filled in but not the x, you have to remember to set that -4 equal to 10 minus 2x and then solve for x. But again, the easiest way to do this is to go to your graph, put it in your calculator, push menu 7-1 to get your table, and then scroll down in the table looking for it.